What happens when the weakest wolf in the pack becomes the one thing everyone fears? For Alara Moss, being an Omega meant invisible servitude, fetching, cleaning, bowing to wolves who couldn't even meet her eyes without curling their lips. She'd learned early to make herself small, to keep her lavender and morning dew scent muted, to never challenge, never speak unless spoken to. The Silver Crest Pack had raised her to know her place, and that place was at the very bottom of a hierarchy carved in blood and dominance. But when Alpha Theron Blackwood rejected their mate bond in front of the entire pack during the Harvest Moon ceremony, shattering it so violently that she collapsed, screaming on the sacred ground, everything changed. And what happens next? No one was prepared for. Not the 10 massive wolves who found her dying in a blizzard, not the ancient prophecy that had been waiting centuries for her blood, and certainly not Alara herself, who would discover that weakness was never her truth. It was her prison. The bonfire blazed against the October night, casting dancing shadows across hundreds of gathered wolves. Pack members from 3 territories had assembled for the Harvest Moon ceremony, the most sacred night of their kind. The air thrummed with anticipation, thick with mingled scents, pine and musk, excitement and aggression, the sharp ozone tang that preceded power displays. Alara stood at the very edge of the gathering, as far from the center as possible without actually leaving the clearing. Her thin dress did little against the autumn chill, but Omegas didn't get the fur-lined cloaks that Alphas wore. They didn't get much of anything except orders and contempt. She'd known this night was coming for weeks, had felt the pull of it in her chest, an ache that grew stronger each day. The mate bond had snapped into place 6 months ago during a routine pack meeting, that mystical tether that connected souls. She'd been serving refreshments when Theron Blackwood walked past, and suddenly the world had tilted. The scent of forest and embers, ozone and steel had wrapped around her senses like a living thing, and she'd known with devastating certainty. This Alpha was her fated mate. The moon goddess had a cruel sense of humor. Theron was next in line to lead Silver Crest, powerful, ambitious, already carrying the authority of command in every movement. His wolf was massive, even by Alpha standards, his presence alone enough to make betas bow their heads. And he'd been courting Lyanna Frost for years, the beautiful daughter of the Western Ridgepack's Alpha. Their union would cement alliances, strengthen bloodlines, bring territory and power. What would Alara bring? Nothing but weakness and shame. She'd tried to hide it, tried to push the bond down deep where no one could sense it, but bonds had a way of making themselves known. 3 weeks ago, Theron had cornered her in the kitchen storage room, his eyes blazing with recognition and fury. "You felt it," he'd said, not a question. "The bond," she'd nodded, unable to lie to her mate. "It's a mistake." His voice had been flat, final. "The moon goddess has ordered, or this is some test of my resolve. An Alpha cannot mate an Omega. It's against the natural order. It weakens bloodlines." "I never asked for this," Alara had whispered. "No, but you'll endure what comes next with dignity, or I'll make sure you leave this pack with nothing." And now, as the harvest moon rose full and golden above the trees, Theron stood at the center of the ceremonial circle, and Alara's world prepared to shatter. Alpha Marcus Moss, her father only in the biological sense, stepped forward to begin the ceremony. The scent of old leather and tobacco marked his approach. He'd never shown her affection, never defended her from the pack's cruelty. An Omega daughter was a stain on an Alpha's reputation, and he'd made sure she understood that from childhood. On this sacred night, Marcus's voice boomed across the gathering, we witness bonds formed and futures forged. Alpha Theron Blackwood has requested the right to speak. The crowd's energy shifted, dozens of wolves pressing closer. This wasn't standard ceremony procedure. Alara's heart began to pound, her wolf stirring restlessly inside her. Something was wrong. The lavender scent that always clung to her skin intensified with her fear. Theron stepped forward, and his gaze found her across the firelit space. Even from this distance, she could see the cold determination in his expression, no regret, no hesitation. "The harvest moon reveals truth," Theron announced, his voice carrying with Alpha command, "and truth demands I speak plainly before the pack and the goddess herself." Time stopped. 6 months ago, a bond formed between myself and Alara Moss. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Wolves turned to stare at her, their eyes gleaming in the firelight. Alara felt frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. This wasn't happening. He wouldn't. A bond I reject. The words hit like physical blows. Around the circle, wolves began to murmur, some shocked, others nodding in approval. An alpha rejecting an omega mate. It was rare but not unheard of, and most believed it justified when bloodlines were at stake. The moon goddess's will is sacred, Theron continued, but she also grants us free will, the right to choose our path. And I choose power over destiny, strength over sentiment. I choose Lyanna Frost as my mate, and I sever this false bond here and now. He raised his hand, and his eyes began to glow amber, his wolf rising to the surface. The scent of ozone intensified, crackling with supernatural energy. Alara Moss, I, Theron Blackwood, alpha heir of Silvercrest Pack, formally reject you as my mate. May the bond break and never reform. The pain began as a spark in her chest, then exploded into an inferno. Alara screamed, the sound tearing from her throat as the mystical tether between them began to snap. It felt like her soul was being ripped in half, every nerve ending catching fire. The mate bond wasn't just emotional, it was woven into their very beings, and severing it was agony beyond description. She collapsed to her knees, hands clawing at her chest as if she could somehow hold the pieces together. Her wolf howled in anguish, thrashing against the cage of her ribs. Around her, wolves watched with expressions ranging from pity to satisfaction to cold indifference. Guards, Theron said calmly, as if he hadn't just destroyed her. Remove her from the ceremony. She's disrupting the sacred rites. Strong hands grabbed her arms, hauling her upright, even as waves of pain continued to crash through her. Alara tried to stand, tried to walk with some shred of dignity, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. The guards, two massive betas, dragged her through the crowd, and wolves stepped aside quickly, as if rejection might be contagious. Please, she managed to gasp, though she wasn't sure what she was begging for. Mercy? Understanding? For someone to acknowledge that this was wrong? Her father's face remained impassive as they dragged her past. Her mother, Iris, turned away entirely, unable or unwilling to watch. No one spoke in her defense. No one challenged the Alpha's right to reject. In pack law, an Alpha's word was absolute. They didn't just remove her from the ceremony, they threw her out of Packlands entirely. The guards hauled her to the northern border, where Silvercrest territory ended and the wilderness began. One of them, she thought his name was Garrett, almost looked sorry as he shoved her toward the tree line. Alpha's orders, he muttered. You're banned from Packlands for 3 full moon cycles. If you're found within our borders before then, the sentence is death. But the storm, the first snowflakes were already beginning to fall, and the temperature had dropped dramatically. She had nothing, no coat, no supplies, no shelter. I'll die out there. Should have thought of that before you tried to trap an Alpha with a fake bond, the other guard sneered. It wasn't fake. I didn't go. Garrett's voice was firmer now, before the Alpha changes his mind and makes it permanent exile. They turned and walked away, leaving her standing at the border as the snow began to fall in earnest. The pain in her chest had dulled to a constant throbbing ache, but it was nothing compared to the cold already seeping into her bones. Alara wrapped her arms around herself and stumbled forward into the dark forest. She had nowhere to go. The nearest human town was 15 miles through treacherous terrain, and the storm was worsening by the minute. Other pack territories wouldn't take in a rejected Omega. It would be seen as an insult to Theron, a challenge to his authority. But staying here meant death by execution. So she walked. The blizzard hit with full force an hour later. Wind howled through, the trees like hunting wolves, driving snow so thick Alara couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. Her thin dress was soaked through, clinging to her skin like ice. She'd lost feeling in her feet, and her hands were turning blue. Her wolf whimpered pitifully, weakened by the bond breaking and unable to shift. The transformation required energy, concentration, strength, all things Alara didn't have. She tried anyway, calling desperately to her other form, but her wolf remained trapped inside, too damaged to emerge. She didn't know how long she walked. Minutes? Hours? Time became meaningless, measured only in the increasing numbness spreading through her limbs. Eventually, she stumbled over a root she couldn't see and fell hard, her face hitting snow and frozen earth. "Get up," she told herself. "Get up or you'll die here." But her body wouldn't obey. The cold was almost comfortable now, a seductive lullaby promising rest. Just close your eyes for a moment. Just rest. Through the driving. Snow. She glimpsed a dark shape, some kind of structure. A barn, maybe, or an old hunting cabin. With the last of her strength, Alara crawled toward it, fingers digging into frozen ground, pulling herself forward inches at a time. The structure turned out to be a collapsed shed, 3 walls still standing and part of a roof providing minimal shelter from the storm. It wasn't much, but it was better than dying in the open. She dragged herself into the corner, curling into the smallest ball possible, trying to preserve any remaining heat. This is it, she thought with strange clarity. This is where it ends. She'd always known being an Omega meant having no value, no worth beyond servitude. But some small, foolish part of her had hoped that maybe someday someone would see her differently. The mate bond had felt like destiny offering her a chance at something more. Instead, it had been her death sentence. Her eyes drifted closed. The storm's howl faded to a distant whisper. The cold stopped hurting, and Alara Moss stopped fighting. Warmth. That was the first thing she noticed. Heat surrounding her, pressing against her frozen skin. She should be dead. Hypothermia didn't reverse itself. The dead didn't feel warmth. Unless this was the afterlife, which seemed unlikely to be so furry. Alara's eyes snapped open. Wolves, massive wolves, their bodies pressed around her in a protective circle, sharing their heat. For a moment, terror spiked through her. Rogues, predators, she was defenseless. But they weren't attacking. They were sleeping? No, watching. Yellow eyes gleamed in the darkness, tracking her every small movement. She counted them slowly, her mind still sluggish from near death. 1, 2. 3 enormous wolves, each easily twice the size of a normal pack wolf. 4, 5. Their fur ranged from silver to black to russet brown. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 massive wolves surrounding her, protecting her from the storm still raging outside the shelter. Her wolf stirred, and instead of fear, Alara felt recognition. These weren't rogues. These weren't ordinary wolves at all. The scent that clung to them, aged oak and winter snow, pine and storm, carried something ancient, something powerful that made her damaged wolf want to bow in respect. The largest wolf, positioned directly in front of her, opened his eyes. They weren't yellow or amber like normal wolves. They were silver, bright as moonlight, and ancient as starlight. He shifted. The transformation was seamless, graceful in a way Alara had never seen before. One moment, a massive wolf. The next, a man crouching before her, easily 6.5 feet tall, heavily muscled, his body covered in scars that told stories of centuries of battle. His hair was black shot through with silver, pulled back from a face that could have been carved from stone. He looked around 40, but his eyes held the weight of something far, far older, and his scent, aged oak, winter snow, pine, and storm, wrapped around her like a blanket. "You're awake," he said, his voice rough as gravel and warm as summer thunder. "We were worried we'd found you too late." "Who?" Alara's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Who are you?" A smile ghosted across his severe features. "My name is Cale Stormborn, and these," he gestured to the wolves around her, "are my guard. We've been searching for you for a very long time." "Searching? I'm no one. I'm just an Omega." Kyle's expression hardened. "Is that what they told you? What you've been taught to believe?" She nodded, confusion overwhelming her. "They lied." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and placed his palm against her forehead. His hand was burning hot compared to her icy skin, and she couldn't help leaning into the warmth. "The power I sense in you, little one. It's been bound. Locked away by magic so complete, I'm amazed you survived it." "Bound? My parents would..." "Never." But even as she said it, memories surfaced, whispered conversations she'd overheard as a child, her mother crying, Her father's voice, hard and determined. It's the only way to protect her. If the old packs learn what she is, they'll come for her. And her mother's broken response. She'll never know what she could have been. Your parents did this to you? Kyle's voice carried a dangerous edge. Suppressed your true nature? To protect me, Alara whispered, though doubt was creeping in. They said I was weak, that I needed protecting. Lies built on fear. Kyle sat back on his heels, and the other 9 wolves shifted as well, becoming men and women of varying ages, all carrying that same ancient weight in their eyes, all bearing scars that marked them as warriors. Do you know what we are, Alara Moss? No. We are the Unchained, the shadow guard of the matriarch. For 3,000 years, we've waited for the bloodline to resurface, for the one the prophecy spoke of. A woman stepped forward, her hair white as snow despite her youthful face, her eyes a startling violet. The scent of night-blooming jasmine and steel clung to her. The prophecy says, when the silver moon weeps blood and the weak rise from death's embrace, the matriarch will return. She will be marked by rejection, forged in suffering, crowned in starlight. She will come when the old laws have rotted, when strength has forgotten honor, when power has forgotten purpose. Alara shook her head. That can't be about me. I'm nobody. I can't even shift properly. Because you've been caged, another guard member said, a massive man with copper-red hair and warm brown eyes. His scent carried whiskey and wood smoke. The rejection, it shattered the binding magic. That's why the pain was so intense, Kyle added. It wasn't just the mate bond breaking. It was 3 decades of suppression spell cracking apart. Your true power is waking up, Alara, and we've been waiting for you. Her wolf stirred again, stronger this time, and Alara gasped as warmth flooded through her chest. Not the burning agony of rejection, but something else. Heat that felt like coming home, like remembering a dream she'd forgotten. Finally, a voice said inside her mind, clear and strong, and nothing like the pitiful whimpers she'd heard before. Finally, I can speak to you, Sister Soul. Alara's eyes widened. My wolf! She's talking to you properly for the first time, Kyle confirmed. The binding prevented full connection. You've been half yourself your entire life. They did this to us, her wolf said, and there was rage in that voice, but also exhilaration. Locked us in chains of magic and fear. But the chains are breaking, sister. I can feel it. What happens now? Alara asked, though she wasn't sure if she was addressing Kale or her wolf or the universe itself. Kyle's smile was fierce and full of promise. Now you learn what you really are. Over the next hours, as the storm gradually weakened, the Unchained told her everything. The matriarch bloodline was ancient, predating the current pack system by millennia. Back when werewolves first walked the earth, they were led by powerful females, queens who could command not just packs, but entire regions, who held gifts beyond normal shifters, empathy that could soothe rage or amplify fear, healing that could mend wounds that should be fatal, command that could bring the strongest alpha to his knees. But power like that bred fear. 500 years ago, the old matriarchs had been hunted down, their bloodline nearly extinguished. Only one child survived, hidden away, her power bound to keep her safe. That child's descendants scattered, and over generations the binding became tradition. Terrified parents suppressing their daughters' gifts, not knowing why, only knowing that this was how their mothers had survived. Your parents thought they were protecting you, said a guard member named Thalia, her dark skin gleaming in the dim light, her scent carrying vanilla and rain. But they stole your birthright. The rejection was never supposed to happen, Kyle added. Your power, even bound, called to that alpha on some level. He felt threatened by you without understanding why. So he destroyed what could have saved him. Saved him? Alara asked. A matriarch's mate becomes something more than alpha. The bond elevates, transforms. He would have been the most powerful male in generations. Kale's expression was grim. Instead, he chose politics and fear. He made a mistake. He didn't just reject a mate. He rejected destiny itself, and there are consequences for that. Alara's wolf laughed inside her mind, a sound like wind through caves. His loss. We don't need a coward. How do I... Alara looked down at her hands. How do I access this power? How do I shift properly? The binding is breaking, but it's not gone yet, Kale said. You need to help it along. Call your wolf, really. Call her, no holding back. Let her come fully to the surface. I've tried. She can't. She can. You're afraid of what you'll become. He was right. Alara had spent her entire life being told that small was safe, invisible was survival. The thought of being powerful, being seen, it terrified her almost as much as dying in the snow had. Sister, her wolf said gently, I would never hurt you. We are one. Let me show you what we can be together. Alara closed her eyes and reached inward, truly looking at her wolf for the first time. What she'd always perceived as small and weak was actually compressed, bound in chains of silver magic that were cracking, crumbling. Her wolf wasn't pitiful. She was magnificent, huge and strong and burning with ancient power. Let her out, Kale encouraged. Don't be afraid. Alara stopped fighting, stopped trying to stay small. She opened herself completely to her other half, and her wolf surged forward with triumphant joy. The transformation began. But it wasn't like any shift she'd ever heard of. Her bones didn't snap and reform. They flowed, lengthening and reshaping like water becoming ice. Her skin didn't tear as fur emerged. The fur grew from within, silver white and thick, shimmering with an otherworldly glow. She felt herself expanding, growing larger and larger, her senses exploding outward. The scent of the Unchained became overwhelming. Aged oak and winter snow from Kyle, night-blooming jasmine from the white-haired woman, whiskey and wood smoke from the copper-haired man, vanilla and rain from Thalia. She could smell everything, the pine trees miles away, the rabbits hiding in their burrows, the melting snow, the stone beneath the shelter, every individual snowflake. Her vision sharpened until she could see in complete darkness. Her hearing picked up heartbeats, breath, the creak of trees bending in wind. And the power, it flooded through her like liquid starlight, vast and ancient and absolutely hers. When the shift completed, Alara stood on 4 legs and looked down at Kale. Down. She was massive, larger than any alpha she'd ever seen, her shoulder higher than a tall man's head. Her fur caught the faint light, glowing silver white like moonlight made solid. When she looked at her reflection in a patch of ice, her eyes were no longer brown, they were violet, blazing with inner fire. We are beautiful, her wolf said with deep satisfaction. Alara threw her head back and howled. The sound shook the shelter's remaining walls. It rolled out across the winter landscape, a declaration of power and survival and rebirth. Birds erupted from trees miles away, small animals fled, and somewhere, in the warm pack house she'd been thrown from, wolves would be waking in terror, wondering what ancient predator had just announced its presence. The Unchained dropped to one knee in unison, fists over hearts. The matriarch returns, Kyle said, and his voice carried awe and joy and fierce loyalty. Welcome home, Your Majesty. The days that followed blurred together in a whirlwind of training and discovery. Kyle's territory, because of course he had one, the Unchained hadn't been sleeping in the wilderness for 3,000 years, was hidden deep in the mountains, protected by magic older than memory. The compound consisted of a massive stone lodge that looked like it had grown from the mountain itself, along with training grounds, a forge, a library that made Alara's breath catch, and living quarters for the 10 guard members. Each morning, before dawn, Kyle woke her for shifting practice. She learned to control the transformation, to move smoothly between forms, to hold her human shape even when emotions ran high. The first few shifts were exhausting, but her wolf's joy made it worth it. Again, Kyle would say, patient and relentless, slower this time. Feel each stage. You need to be able to shift mid-combat if necessary. After shifting practice came weapons training. Alara had never held a blade before, but the guard insisted she learn. You won't always have time to shift, explained Rorn, the copper-haired warrior. His scent of whiskey and wood smoke had become comforting, associated with his rumbling laugh and gentle corrections of her stance. And some enemies can't be fought with teeth alone. They taught her staff work first, then graduated to short blades, then long swords. Her body, no longer suppressed, learned quickly. Muscle memory from her wolf's instincts translated into human grace. Within a week she could hold her own against Thalia for a full minute before being disarmed. "You're a natural," Thalia said, offering her hand to help Alara up after a particularly hard fall. "Or maybe you're remembering, your bloodline was full of warrior queens." But the most startling training involved her gifts. The empathy hit her first. She'd always been sensitive to others' emotions, but she'd thought it was just keen observation. Now, with her power unbound, she could feel the emotional landscape of everyone around her like a physical presence. Kyle's steady determination, his ancient patience, Roran's warm affection and protective instincts, Thalia's fierce loyalty and hidden grief for fallen comrades. The white-haired woman, her name was Lyris, carried the weight of millennia, sadness mixed with hope renewed. "You can do more than sense emotions," Lyris explained during one training session, her violet eyes intense. "You can influence them, calm rage, amplify courage, break through mental shields. It's the gift that made matriarchs such effective leaders." Alara practiced on volunteers from the Guard, learning to project calm, to sense deception, to ease old pains. The magic felt natural, like breathing, once she stopped being afraid of it. The healing ability emerged the third day, when she accidentally cut herself during weapon training. Before anyone could tend to it, she'd felt an instinctive pulse of power, and the wound had sealed, itself glowing briefly violet before leaving nothing but unmarked skin. "That's advanced," Kyle said, examining her hand with careful attention. "Most matriarchs couldn't heal themselves, only others." She practiced on small injuries first, bruises, shallow cuts, strained muscles. The power hummed through her palms, warm and certain, and tissue knitted together beneath her touch. By the end of the week, she could heal a broken bone in under an hour. But the command ability, that was the one that frightened her. "It's different from Alpha Command," Kyle explained. "Alphas force submission through dominance. You compel cooperation through connection. You make others want to follow, understand why they should. But it can be twisted, used to control rather than lead. So I just never use it? No. You learn to use it with honor. Come." He led her to the training ground where the other 9 Guard members waited. At Kyle's nod, they all shifted into their true forms, and Alara gasped. These weren't large wolves, they were dire wolves, mythic beings from the First Age, each standing taller at the shoulder than her shifted form. Kyle, in his wolf shape, was truly massive, easily 12 feet long, his silver and black fur marked with ancient scars, his eyes glowing with that eerie silver light. "We are bound by oath and prophecy," Kale said, his voice carrying even in wolf form. "But we will not always be your guard. You'll need to command others, those who have no loyalty to you yet, those who resist change. Practice on us." "I don't want to control you," Alara protested. "Then don't. Lead us. There's a difference." She shifted into her wolf form. It came easier now, taking only seconds, and faced the 10 dire wolves. In the week she'd known them, she'd learned their personalities. Kyle's steady leadership and dry humor, Roran's warmth and surprising gentleness, Thalia's sharp wit and fierce protectiveness, Lyris's ancient wisdom. The others, Dax, Nero, Sable, Quinn, Jax, and Vex, each unique, each powerful in their own right. "Follow," she projected, not as a command but as an invitation. "Run with me." The power that flowed from her wasn't force, it was connection, a pack bond deeper than blood, a certainty that together they were stronger, that she would lead them well, and they would never be betrayed. As one, the 10 dire wolves moved, falling into formation behind her. Alara ran, and they followed, not because they had to, but because they chose to, because her power made them remember what true leadership felt like. They ran through the mountain forests, a pack of legend, and her howl of pure joy echoed from the peaks. This was what she'd been missing her whole life. Not a mate. Not acceptance from wolves who saw her as beneath them. This was family. Time moved strangely in the mountain compound. Days turned to weeks, though Alara couldn't have said exactly how many had passed. The 3 moon cycles of her banishment were ticking away, but she had no intention of returning to Silver Crest. That pack had never been her home. This was home. The guard who trained with her, laughed with her, shared meals and stories, and slowly, carefully, offered their true selves. Kyle, who pushed her hard but always with purpose, who watched her with something warm in his ancient eyes. The library where she devoured texts about the old matriarchs, learning her own history. The forge where Nero taught her to mend armor. The garden where Sable grew healing herbs. She was learning who Alara Moss, no, who the matriarch, was meant to be. But the outside world had a way of intruding. It was Dax who brought the news, returning from a scouting run with snow on his fur and tension in his scent, sage and thunderstorm, normally so calm, now crackling with concern. Silver Crest wolves, he reported after shifting. Scout found tracks at the edge of our territory, female, moving deliberately, like she was searching for something. Description? Kyle's voice went cold and tactical. Couldn't get close enough, but the scent, Dax's jaw tightened. Cinnamon and iron, blood hunger. I know that signature. It's Lyanna Frost. The name sent ice through Alara's veins. Lyanna, the beautiful beta who Theron had chosen, who had smiled with vicious satisfaction as Alara was dragged from the ceremony. She's looking for me, Alara said quietly. Likely, Kyle agreed. The question is why? Revenge? Confirmation of your death? Or Theron sent her? Alara's wolf stirred, no longer whimpering but growling low and dangerous. He rejected me publicly. If I survived, if word spreads, it undermines his authority. He'd want to make sure I'm truly gone. Kale's expression was grim. Then she'll report back, and they'll come in force. Let them, Alara said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. I'm not running anymore. You're not ready for a full confrontation. Maybe not, but I'm not the Omega they threw away. And it's time they learned that. Over the next 2 days, more scouts returned with troubling reports. Silver Crest was mobilizing, not just a search party, but a war party. 25 wolves, including Theron himself, moving toward the mountain territory with clear hostile intent. This is unusual, Lyra said during the War Council. Even if they suspect you survived, a force this large indicates something else. They're making a statement. What statement? Alara asked. That the Unchained are harboring Silver Crest's cast-off, that we're challenging Theron's authority by keeping you alive. It's an excuse to test our strength, to see if the old rumors about the Shadow Guard are true. Kale's eyes gleamed silver. Then let's give them the truth. They had advantages, knowledge of the terrain, superior training, and the simple fact that the Unchained were apex predators that current packs had forgotten existed. But Alara's power was still new, still untested and real. Combat. I need to face them, she insisted. This isn't your fight. The hell it isn't, Roran growled. You're our matriarch. Your fights are our fights. He's right, Kale said. But you'll lead. This is your judgment to make, your authority to establish. We'll follow your command. The certainty in his voice, in all their voices, settled something in Alara's chest. She wasn't alone. She would never be alone again. Then here's what we do, she said, and began to plan. They met Silver Crest at the border 3 days later, in a clearing that had once been used for territory negotiations centuries ago. Ancient stone markers stood at compass points, weathered but still radiating faint magic. Theron arrived with his war party, 25 wolves, all in human form, but ready to shift in an instant. Alphas and strong betas, warriors in leather and steel, armed with silver-edged weapons that could harm shifters even in wolf form. The scent of ozone and steel rolled off Theron in waves, his alpha dominance on full display. Beside him stood Lyanna Frost, beautiful and cold, her cinnamon and iron scent sharp with anticipation. Her hand rested casually on a dagger hilt. Alara stood with the Unchained behind her, all 11 of them in human form. To Silver Crest's war party, they must have looked wildly outnumbered. Good. Alara Moss, Theron's voice carried command, expecting her to bow, to submit. You were banished from Silver Crest lands for 3 moon cycles. Those cycles have not passed. You violate pack law by your presence here. We're not on Silver Crest lands, Alara replied calmly. This is neutral ground, and I'm not Alara Moss anymore. Theron's eyes narrowed. You're a rejected Omega with delusions of importance. These, he gestured dismissively at the Unchained, mercenaries have filled your head with nonsense, but it doesn't change what you are. Weak, worthless, mine to command. I was never yours. Alara's voice remained steady. The goddess may have suggested a bond, but you chose to break it. That was your right, just as it's my right to find my true place. Your true place is dead in the snow. Lyanna spoke for the first time, her voice honey-sweet and poisonous. I went looking for your corpse to be sure. Imagine my surprise to find tracks leading here instead. Disappointed? Alara asked. Intrigued? Lyanna's smile was vicious. Theron wanted to send assassins, but I volunteered for this. I wanted to see what was left of the pathetic Omega who tried to trap my mate. And I have to say, new clothes and a few sword lessons haven't changed the essential truth. She moved so fast it was nearly a blur, shifting mid-leap, a beautiful russet wolf with hate in her golden eyes, aiming straight for Alara's throat. Alara didn't move. Kyle twitched, ready to intervene, but Alara's command stopped him. Mine. She'd been waiting for this. Part of her had known it would come. That violence would be the ultimate test that her growth meant nothing until she could stand against those who'd tormented her. Lyanna's jaws opened, aimed for Alara's throat, and Alara caught her mid-air. One hand on Lyanna's muzzle, one on her shoulder, and the power that flooded through Alara was absolute. Command mixed with raw physical strength, her matriarch authority smashing against Lyanna's will like a tsunami against a sandcastle. Down, Alara commanded. Lyanna's wolf obeyed before her conscious mind could resist, slamming to the ground at Alara's feet, pinned by invisible weight. She thrashed, trying to break free, but Alara's power held her absolutely. You wanted to see what was left of the pathetic Omega? Alara's voice carried across the clearing, and for the first time, she let her eyes glow violet, let her power show. Nothing. She died in the snow. I am what rose from her ashes. She released Lyanna, who scrambled backward, shifting into human form with fear now obvious in her scent. Theron snarled and began to shift, his massive alpha wolf emerging. And the Unchained shifted with him. 10 dire wolves appeared in the clearing, each easily twice Theron's size, their forms crackling with ancient power. Kyle stood in front, silver eyes fixed on the alpha, and the message was clear. Try it. The Silver Crest war party froze. This wasn't possible. Wolves that large didn't exist anymore. They were legends, myths, monsters from children's stories about the First Age. But here they stood, very real and very capable of tearing apart the war party in seconds. What are you? Theron's voice came out strained, his wolf's dominance completely suppressed by the overwhelming power radiating from the Unchained. We are the Shadow Guard, Kyle said, his words somehow clear even in wolf form. We are the Unchained, bound by oath to protect the matriarch bloodline, and you, little Alpha, just made a very serious mistake. Matriarch! Theron's eyes darted to Alara. That's impossible. The bloodline is extinct. Alara is just... Your parents bound her power at birth, Lyrus's voice rang out, the white-haired woman stepping forward. Locked it away to protect her from packs who would have killed her. But when you rejected the mate bond, you shattered that binding. You freed her. Alara felt her wolf rising, ready to shift, to show them all exactly what she'd become. But she held it back. This needed to end with choice, not just force. You came here for what reason? Alara asked Theron. To kill me? To drag me back? To prove your authority? All of it, Theron admitted, his voice hard. A rejected Omega doesn't get to find new allies and new power. It undermines everything. Pack law, hierarchy, the natural order. Your natural order, Alara cut him off. The one where Omegas are worthless, where mates are disposable if they are inconvenient, where power means the right to abuse those weaker than you. That's not natural law, that's just cruelty wearing a crown. So what? Lyanna spat from where she'd retreated to Theron's side. You're going to challenge him? Fight him for leadership? You're still just... I don't want Silver Crest, Alara said flatly. I want something much simpler. I want you all to leave. Return to your territory and never return to mine. These mountains, these forests, they're under my protection now. Anyone who comes here seeking shelter will find it. Anyone who comes here seeking violence... She smiled, sharp and cold. Ask Lyanna what happens then. Theron's jaw clenched. This isn't over. You can't just declare yourself above pack law. I don't answer to pack law. Alara shifted, The transformation was instant, and her massive wolf form towered over even the dire wolves of the Unchained. Her silver-white fur blazed with inner light, and her violet eyes fixed on Theron with absolute authority. "I am the matriarch," she said, her voice carrying to every wolf in the clearing through sheer power of will. "I am the bloodline your ancestors tried to destroy because they feared what they couldn't control. I am what the moon goddess created before your precious packs existed, and I am done being afraid." She threw her head back and howled, and the sound carried across miles, a declaration of territory, of power, of sovereignty. Every wolf in the clearing, except the Unchained, dropped to their knees involuntarily, forced down by the sheer weight of her authority. Theron fought it, his alpha pride warring with the instinct to submit, and Alara could see the exact moment he realized the truth. He had no power here. Against a matriarch in her prime, backed by the legendary Shadow Guard, his war party was nothing. "Mercy," he gasped out, the word clearly painful. "We ask for mercy." Alara shifted back to human form, standing naked in the snow without feeling the cold, her power keeping her warm. "You'll have it, this time. But here's my judgment. Alpha Theron Blackwood, you will return to Silvercrest and announce that these mountains are sovereign territory under matriarch protection. Any wolf, omega, rogue, exile who seeks sanctuary here will find it, and any who pursue them will face me. You will reform your pack laws to protect the vulnerable, or you will find your neighbors less friendly. And you, specifically, will live with the knowledge of what you rejected." She stepped closer, and despite the 10 dire wolves watching, despite his war party, Theron couldn't help but lean back. "You could have been my mate, could have shared this power, this future. Instead, you'll rule a small pack in a changing world, while I reshape everything around you. That's your punishment, not death, but irrelevance." Theron's face twisted with rage and regret and helpless fury. "Go," Alara commanded, "before I change my mind." The Silvercrest wolves fled. There was no other word for it. They shifted and ran. Even Theron, even Lyanna, their tails between their legs and their dominance shattered. When they were gone, Alara finally allowed herself to feel it. The shaking in her limbs, the adrenaline crash, the reality of what she'd just done. She'd faced down an alpha and his war party. She'd claimed territory and sovereignty. She'd won. Kyle shifted and wrapped a cloak around her shoulders, his expression proud. "Well done, Your Majesty." "I was terrified," she admitted. "Fear and courage aren't opposites. Courage is acting despite fear." He smiled, warm and genuine. "You're going to be a magnificent queen." The other guard members shifted and crowded around, congratulating her, teasing about Theron's face when the dire wolves appeared, already turning the confrontation into legend. But it was Kale's hand on her shoulder, his steady presence, that made Alara feel truly safe. "What happens now?" she asked him quietly, as the others dispersed to secure the border. "Now, you build your queendom. You offer sanctuary to those who need it. You train, you learn, you grow into your full power." He paused, something vulnerable flickering in his ancient eyes. "And if you'll have me, I'll stand beside you through all of it, not as guard, but as your chosen mate." Alara's breath caught. Chosen. The goddess gives us fated mates, but she also gives us free will. Fate suggested Theron. You rejected him back, as was your right. Now you're free to choose whoever calls to your heart. His voice dropped lower. "I've waited 3,000 years for you, Alara. I can wait longer if you need time. But know this. I see you, all of you, power and vulnerability, and I want nothing more than to stand beside you as you change the world." His scent, aged oak and winter snow, pine and storm, wrapped around her, and Alara realized it had become home. This male who'd found her dying, who'd trained her without coddling, who'd stood back and let her fight her own battles while always ready to catch her if she fell. The bond snapped into place, not fated by the goddess but chosen by them, stronger for being freely given. The mark appeared on both their necks, not the traditional mate mark, but something older, glowing violet and silver intertwined. "Yes," Alara said simply. "I choose you." Kyle's smile was brilliant, his eyes bright with joy that had been denied for millennia. He pulled her close and kissed her, gentle and fierce and full of promise, and around them the Unchained howled, a song of celebration, of family, of the matriarch finally coming home. So Alara's journey began, from rejected Omega to true queen, from weakness to power, from isolation to family. She learned that strength wasn't always loud, that true power was tempered by mercy, and that the wolves who loved you by choice were worth more than any who loved you by fate alone. Silver Crest reformed under threat of matriarch judgment. Other packs heard of the new sovereignty in the mountains and came to test it. Some left humbled, some stayed as allies, all left changed, Omegas and rogues. And exiles found their way to Alara's territory, seeking the sanctuary she'd promised. She gave it freely, building not just a pack, but a true community where worth wasn't measured by dominance, but by character. And through it all, Kale stood beside her, not behind, not ahead, but truly beside, partners in every sense. The Unchained became her counsel, her friends, her family. The found family she'd always needed and never knew she could have. Was it perfect? No, there were challenges, conflicts, battles both political and physical. But Alara faced them as herself, fully powerful, fully seen, fully loved. She'd been cast out to die in the snow. Instead, she'd risen as something far greater. What did you think of this story? Have you ever felt overlooked or underestimated, only to discover your true strength when you stopped letting others define you? Let me know in the comments below. I love hearing your thoughts. If you enjoyed Alara's journey from rejected Omega to legendary matriarch, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear this story. Your support helps us create more empowering tales of resilience and transformation. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss our next chapter. We have more epic werewolf stories, powerful character arcs, and tales of found family coming soon. And here's a teaser for what's next. The Blood Moon rises in 3 months, and with it comes an ancient threat that even the matriarch and her shadow guard have never faced. Can Alara master her full power in time, or will the darkness consume everything she's built? Thank you for listening to this story. We'll see you in the next chapter. Until then, remember, you are never as powerless as others try to make you believe.